big event the whole country is talking about, Mrs. Miniver, a timely drama, tuned to the terrific tempo of the world of today. Mrs. Miniver, the story of a valiant woman whose love and devotion shield her family from the cruelest onslaught of devastation ever visited upon mankind. It is a story of youth, too, of young people who hold aloft against the shadow of the present everything that is brightness for the future. Mrs. Miniver is as great in its rich moments of quiet tenderness as in its vivid moments of unbridled terror and sweeping action. You will not soon forget the gallantry of this family of brave and decent people, whose courage is the flaming spirit of a family of brave and decent nations.
In 1942, the movie Mrs. Miniver was the highest grossing film in America. It was something of a phenomenon. It won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actress. Winston Churchill said that the movie was worth 100 battleships. And the movie hit the theaters at precisely the time that our country had officially entered the Second World War. So its message was inspiring. 2 of the most pivotal scenes in that movie, which is set in England at the beginning of the war, actually take place in church. As a matter of fact, they take place in an Anglican church, just like our own. In the first scene, a robed choir enters singing the hymn, "Children of the Heavenly King," a hymn we still sing. And then, a few moments later, the verger enters frantically with the news that the country was at war. Later on, at the end of the film, we see the congregation gathered again in the now bombed remains of their church, listening to a stirring sermon, and then the choir processes out to the hymn "Onward, Christian Soldiers," another hymn we still sing. It was a rousing movie, and of course, since it was released in 1942, the war wasn't over yet. For America, it had really just begun. So there was much uncertainty, but there was also much determination. 1942 was also precisely the time that this part of our church that I'm standing in was being built. Now, as I mentioned before, we are Anglicans, just like the Church of England parish that is dramatized in Mrs. Miniver. And Anglicans are a rather unique sort of Christian that see themselves both as Catholic and Reformed. But Anglicans are not Roman Catholics. We are related historically to the Church of England, which famously separated from the Church of Rome in 1534. And afterwards, wherever the English went, their church went with them. So there are Anglican churches throughout the world, just like there are Roman Catholic churches throughout the world. In the United States, after the Revolutionary War, Anglican churches became known as the Episcopal Church. They were independent of the Church of England, but still bound together by deep bonds of shared history, theology, traditions, and affection. So Anglican churches were a part of a great big family. And in 1942, a part of our family was suffering terribly. As I said, that year, this part of the church was under construction. The nave had been built in 1888, but by the early 40s, the church had become so overcrowded that vestrymen were complaining about how unsafe the church had become. Plans were drawn up, funds were raised, and then, just as work was getting started and the frame of the new expansion was being put in place, war came to America. This project was begun because we knew that we needed a bigger church. But before it was completed, we had learned or had been reminded of just how big our church really was. All of those place names that people kept seeing in the news, all of the pictures, London, Canterbury, Coventry, these places weren't just part of ancient English history, they were a part of our own history and our own family as Anglicans. So there was an interesting feature up here in this new part of the building, in the 1940s expansion, that you might just pass by and overlook, but they are important symbols, and they are making a statement. Around the choir stalls and up around the high altar, you may notice lots of little shields. Maybe you have seen them many times and just thought of them as decorative. But these are the shields of the coat of arms of each cathedral in the Church of England. Our brother and sister Anglicans across the Atlantic, whose churches and cathedrals were being bombed, they were given a symbolic place in this, the holiest part of our newly expanded church building. In 1942, this church had to know the statement it was making when it placed those shields around its new altar. In a sense, it was saying, we don't come to this sacrament alone. We do so in the presence of all those who helped to bring us here in the past, and with all those in the world in the present who need our prayers and who need our help. Another thing that I find fascinating about the 1941 and 42 expansion is that it became symbolic of this church's spiritual life. We held on to our heritage and that which was old, while at the same time looking to the future and building something new. We did this quite literally. The nave of the church is our original building, and the parish hall is our original parish hall. We didn't dispense with our old buildings. We just expanded them, connected them, and made them better. But that was not always our plan. You might say that it was a solution to a problem that God had to show us. But let's go all the way back to the beginning for a moment. As I said a moment ago, wherever the English went, their church went with them. The first Anglican or Episcopal church in our area was St. George's in Hempstead. It was founded in 1702 during the reign of Queen Anne, and then chartered in 1735 by King George II. It was in St. George's Church that one of the first settlers of Rockville Centre, Anthony de Mott, was married to his wife Phoebe in 1745. As time passed, and as the population of South Nassau County grew, eventually the residents of the settlement along the Mill River, which had come to be known as Rockville Centre, decided that it was time to have their own Episcopal parish, so that they no longer needed to travel all the way up to Hempstead. The first attempt in 1873 by a small group of families to start an Episcopal mission was not successful. But by the beginning of 1885, the community had grown enough that a second attempt was made. A group of gentlemen met at the residence of Francis Wilson on North Village Avenue in March of that year to organize a new mission. With the blessing of the Bishop of Long Island, the mission was founded. A space for worship was rented in Institute Hall, and the first service was held the Sunday after Easter, April the 12th, 1885. On May 10th, the first baptism was held, and on May 31st, the first Holy Eucharist was celebrated. But the church didn't even have a proper name yet. It was later that year, while traveling on the train together to New York City, that the mission founders settled upon a name. On Christmas Eve, December the 24th, 1885, it was announced that the Protestant Episcopal Mission of Rockville Centre would from that day forward be known as the Church of the Ascension. In June of 1887, the church purchased a piece of property on the corner of North Village Avenue and School Street, later changed to Quealy Place. 1 year later, on July 30th, 1888, the congregation gathered at Institute Hall and processed down the street singing a popular hymn of the day, "Onward, Christian Soldiers," until they reached their new property and formally broke ground on their new building. A few months later, on October the 13th, 1888, the cornerstone was laid by the Bishop of Long Island. One of the first windows in this newly consecrated building was given by Mr. Gracie Sayre Roberts and his wife Euphemia. Mr. Roberts was the founder of the church's Sunday school, and Euphemia contributed much of the original needlework on the original communion rail cushions. 4 years before the parish was founded, the young couple had tragically lost their daughter Fanny. In 1888, when the parish finally settled into its own building, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts donated a window in Fanny's memory. The window's cross and lily and crown are symbols of the death and resurrection of the heavenly King. They were signs of faith and hope for that grieving family, just as they remain signs of faith and hope for us today. The church is filled with many of such memorial gifts that enrich our worship and keep us connected with people who worshiped here long ago and whose hope was in the faith we still practice. In 1892, the Reverend William Edgar Nyes was appointed as the first full-time priest in charge, and it was during this period that a rectory was constructed adjacent to the church. By 1901, the growing parish was in such need of space for various parish organizations to meet that Reverend Nyes encouraged the mission to purchase an adjoining lot and to build a separate parish hall there, which it did in May of that year. On March the 6th, 1910, a young immigrant priest from Wales, the Reverend D. Herbert O'Dowd, was appointed as the new priest in charge. By this point, the church had become self-sustaining, and the following year it petitioned the diocese to be moved from mission status to parish status. The request was granted, and in 1912, the Reverend O'Dowd was named as the first rector. Sadly, the Reverend O'Dowd's tenure would not be a long one. He resigned his position on July the 1st, 1918, to join the United States Army as a chaplain. A year later, he was killed in a mid-air crash over the base at which he was stationed. The second rector was the Reverend Frederick Hansfield, who was called to Ascension in October of 1918. With the end of the Great War and the post-war boom of the 20s, Rockville Centre grew, and Ascension grew with it. The buildings were becoming quite cramped, so in 1927, 2 houses were purchased on Hempstead Avenue with the intention of demolishing the homes and building a new church campus there. Father Hansfield resigned in 1928 due to ill health and was succeeded by the third rector, Seward Goss Sherwood. It would be up to Mr. Sherwood, as he preferred to be called, to finish the job of relocating the church to a new campus. And then, a few months later, the stock market crashed. The following 10 years would be a time of great uncertainty for the parish. It still held out hope of building a new church, but as the Depression lingered, it became obvious that a completely new church was not going to be an option. Then, after the hurricane of 1938 required some repairs to be made to the present buildings, another option occurred to Mr. Sherwood. Why not just expand the present church and the present parish hall and link them together? And that was the solution. It had to have been a divinely inspired one, because had we moved, we would no longer have been right in the heart of the village, and that would be a great loss for us today. And I think we definitely would have lost something quirky and special if we had lost our original building. The solution Mr. Sherwood came up with, I think, has become very symbolic of the spirit of this parish. We hold on to the old while at the same time making necessary changes to meet the needs of the time we are living in. We are this combination of tradition and progress. And you can see that in how we kept our old building, but made it new again. A few years ago, when we were replacing the floor in the nave, we were able to see again the precise spot where the old building becomes the new building. But most people who see this building now have no idea that it used to be much smaller. The old and the new were blended to make it feel like it has always been this way. While Mr. Sherwood's struggle to enlarge this church was nothing compared with the battles being fought by his clergy counterparts in Britain, still, it wasn't easy. Although the majority of the construction was completed by the end of 1942, many of the wood furnishings, including the pews, wouldn't come for years. The war made everything hard to get, and workmen were hard to come by. There were moments of triumph for Mr. Sherwood. In 1945, the church paid off the debt it had incurred to rebuild the church years ahead of schedule. But there were also moments of great sadness. In 1946, Mr. Sherwood's wife, Lena Perkins Sherwood, died. The rose window on the western wall would later be rebuilt and rededicated in her honor by Mr. Sherwood's successor, Father Charles Carnan. Father Carnan became the fourth rector in December of 1949, following Mr. Sherwood's retirement. Father Carnan's tenure would not be a long one, but the post-war boom resulted in incredible growth both for the parish and for the village of Rockville Centre. It was also during Father Carnan's tenure that one of the darkest moments in the village history occurred. On February the 17th, 1950, shortly after 10:30 p.m., two Long Island Railroad trains collided with each other head-on 2 blocks away from the church. The two trains had been sharing a track due to the construction of a new elevated train station in Rockville Centre. The tragedy resulted in 29 deaths and more than 100 injuries, and our parish hall was one of the sites used as a temporary morgue. In 1954, the Reverend Homer Buffton became the 5th rector of Ascension. And although the 1950s saw a post-war boom in membership, by the mid-60s, the church had begun to struggle with attendance and finances. In 1971, Father Buffton retired, and the bishop asked Father Donald Latham to step in as interim. The following year, Father Latham was elected as the 6th rector of Ascension, and the church began a period of growth and renewal. A new rectory was purchased in the village, and investments and repairs were made to other parts of the church property. In 1975, Father Latham, together with church warden Frank Sipe, started a church fair that they would call the Friendship Fair. This fair would end up becoming a major event in the life of the community, and it continues to be even 50 years later. In 1979, the Episcopal Church authorized a new Book of Common Prayer with many expanded and revised liturgies. While Father Latham assisted the parish in adopting this new prayer book, he also guided it to use the traditional language liturgies known as Rite 1, thus maintaining continuity with the old prayer book while incorporating some of the changes of the new prayer book. Although Father Latham was initially reluctant to have female altar servers, he was eventually persuaded that times were changing, and sometimes it is necessary for the church to make changes too. Father Latham would retire in 1994 and be followed by the 7th rector, Father James Dalton Thompson. Father James would oversee another period of great transformation at Ascension, particularly in its music program, with the calling of Kenneth Dyer Jr. to be organist and choirmaster, and the installation of a new pipe organ in 2001. A columbarium was added to the church chapel, and air conditioning was also added. When Father James was called to another parish in 2005, the parish entered into a long transition period. The 8th rector, Father Thomas Peloton, was called in 2008, but his tenure would be very short, and the church would again enter into another transition. During these years, it was largely the committed and capable lay leaders of the parish that sustained its life, with the assistance of the loving interim priest in charge, Father Bob Herrick. Finally, it comes to me. I am Father Kevin Morris, and I am the 9th rector of the Church of the Ascension. My tenure here began in 2012, and we have seen many changes since then. But I think the spirit of Ascension remains the same. We try to hold on to the past, to tradition, to the essentials of our faith and to our values, while at the same time making changes when necessary. We still worship using traditional language. We still uphold the creeds. We still value the essential beliefs and practices of our faith. We still seek to make our worship as beautiful as possible. But we aren't afraid to add new things or to make important changes. Sometimes the changes are so well incorporated into our life that, like our expanded building, after a short time, people don't even notice them anymore. We added a ramp to the front of the church, installed new front doors with stained glass windows, tiled the nave floor, and renovated the Sunday school, including the children's chapel. And every step of the way, we have always tried to make the new blend in with the old. That is, I think, one of the things that makes Ascension so special. Our ability to blend the new with the old. And this isn't just with our building. It is with the people who worship here as well. There have been difficulties for sure. During the COVID pandemic, we were affected by the lockdown as much as anyone. I am proud to say, though, that we rose to the occasion and never missed a Sunday Mass. We immediately started broadcasting our services even when they had to be filmed in the rectory dining room. But since then, live stream services have become a part of our common life. God always has the power to make good things happen even when times are tough. And this building, this church, stands as a symbol of that. And God isn't done with us yet. Right now, we are embarking on a capital campaign to fund some important new improvements to our church and parish hall. We want to restore the porch entrance that once existed on the North Village Avenue side of the parish hall, adding a ramp to allow for improved access to the building. We want to renovate the kitchen, making necessary repairs for code compliance and safety, and paint the building inside and out. And there will always be more work to be done. As usual, with all these projects, our goal is to blend the old with the new, to honor the past while building for the future. That is a part of who we are as the Church of the Ascension. We are old and young. We are men and women. We are lifelong Episcopalians and recent converts. We are people who love glorious high masses, and we are people who like quiet spoken services. We are individuals who love the Catholic traditions of our faith, and we are individuals who love the Protestant traditions of our faith. We are conservatives and liberals, Democrats and Republicans, gay and straight. We are people who value and treasure our heritage as Anglicans, and we are people who have never even heard of the movie Mrs. Miniver. We are a mix, but to everyone who worships here and is a part of this community, the most important thing we are is home. So welcome home.